So good afternoon, friends, and welcome back to the online learning platform at Department of Civil Engineering. Now, today we are going to speak with respect to the course Municipal Wastewater Engineering. Now, I realize that you have Environmental Engineering Lab. Last semester, you had studied Water Supply and Treatment Engineering, and these were the course outcomes for that subject. And this semester, when you're dealing with Municipal Wastewater Treatment Engineering, these would be the course outcomes. The objective is to enhance the knowledge. The objective is to plug the gaps in your curriculum. Now, all of you have learned in the last semester the need for a water supply scheme, the significance of a water supply scheme, the different units of a water supply scheme. In this presentation, I will be taking you through the same: preliminary treatment, primary treatment, secondary treatment, and tertiary, or rather miscellaneous treatment. Now, as you're aware, for a water supply scheme, the basic source is water. Now, the source of water can be a surface or subsurface source. If you're talking about a surface source, it can be a river or a lake. So basically, you're talking about fresh water. You are very well aware that we cannot go for sea or ocean, which are marine ecosystems, because of salinity content, and they would require additionally sufficient demineralization process. Now, once that you have identified your source of drinking water to be a surface source or a subsurface source, such as your aquifers, your bore wells, your tube wells, and deep wells, the next operation would be to transport this water from the source, from the original source, to the treatment plant. Obviously, your treatment plant is on the land. These structures, which helps you to transport the water safely from the source to the treatment plant, is called as intake structures. Now, the image what you see on the screen is with respect to transferring water from Kaveri. Okay, the second image, the first one is your Kaveri River, Shiva Anicut. The second image what you see is your intake structures. The third image what you see is your water supply scheme, that is a different treatment units. The fourth image what you see is a bloated image of the same. Now, what's the intake structure? Intake structure is that installation or that structure which helps you to transport the water in a safe and clean mechanism. Now, intake structures can be of different types, which I will discuss further. But what we need to understand is primarily, what does the intake structure do? It relocates water or transports water, and while it does that, it ensures that there is no floating matter. Because you know that, whether it's a lake or a river, your water would contain some floating matter. It could be bark, it could be wood, it could be leaves, and any other suspended matter. So typically, an intake structure would have screens, fine screen and coarse screen. The objective is, when the water is entering the intake structure, these floating matters must not be present. And then the water is transported via pipelines, closed conduits, to most probably closed conduits to a treatment plant. Now, how were the intake structures classified? Submerged or exposed, okay, depending on the water presence. Now, wet intake or dry intake. But the most important classification remains river intake, reservoir intake, lake intake, canal intake. That is, depending on the source of water, this classification exists. This is an exposed intake, wherein at any point of time, even during high flood level, the intake is exposed. It is not submerged. Now, dry intake and wet intake, it basically depends on the relative positioning of water in the intake structure itself. Canal intake, obvious, because the source of water is the canal. Okay. River intake, because you are removing the water from a flowing or running ecosystem such as river. Reservoir intake is when the source of water is with respect to a reservoir. As you know, reservoir is a installation or a structure which holds water, and obviously you have a dam. Okay, so you have upstream and downstream, so you're looking at a structure which is upstream. Lake intake, that is when the source of water is a lake. That is when the source of drinking water for a municipality, the source of drinking water to be treated is a lake. And similar logic appeared or appears so forth. Now, once that your water has been transported via the floating matter, once that the water has been transported, okay, has been removed from the lake or a river or a reservoir through the intake structures to the treatment plant. What is that they do first? First is the preliminary treatment. In the preliminary treatment, they have screens. Now, it can be fine screen, coarse screen, bar racks. It depends. Now, as you are aware and as you learned in the last semester, these screens have one primary objective, that is to remove any floating matter in the water. And this is very important and very critical, because if these floating matter end up in your primary treatment or any subsequent operation, they may impair the process, they may impair the treatment, they may destabilize the entire objective itself. All right. Now, what's the next operation? Aeration. Now, aeration, as simple as it, when you bring air in contact with water or you bring water in contact with air, what is the objective? To remove the impurities, to remove the color, odor, and taste, which is due to certain impurities, which could be a gas or it could be any dissolved or suspended solid. What is the logic? When you have air mixing with water or water mixing with air, there is exchange of gases. Oxygen enters and gases such as carbon dioxide exit. Okay, so when any gas which was originally contributing a color, odor, and taste exits, then the purpose is served. In a similar manner, when oxygen enters the water, it may undergo oxidation. Rather, I would say it can trigger oxidation of any impurity. So once oxidation of any impurity takes place, its original state has changed. When its original state has changed, then obviously the color, odor, taste is also eliminated. Now, this is a typical cascade aerator. Please remember, we have different types of aerators based on the mechanism of how the mixing takes place. Cascade means steps. When the water is made to run down steps. The image on the left hand side is a cascade aerator wherein it is not operational. Probably it's under repair or maintenance. And you see on the right hand side is where it is fully functional. So when the water is falling via the steps, okay, it gets mixed with the air. Now, the other classification or type that you have learned is the inclined apron aerators. Again, it depends. If you got riffle plates, the intensity of aeration improves because you allow a vertical jump. You allow the water to jump. Okay. Now, this is the next type of aerators wherein you've got tray aerators and cone aerators. Now, please understand, when it comes to cone aerators, the prime objective of using this is to remove iron and manganese. As you're aware, iron and manganese, contribute stains. They always occur together, they come together. Now, if you got reddish stains, it's because of your iron. And if you got brown stains, it's because of manganese. Okay. Now, moving further, spray aerators. Now, here, the objective and the intensity improves or is enhanced because the surface area is improved. While you may say that the previous exercises were volume based, this is surface area based. And this is also as you had learned in the previous semester. So water comes out as fine jets. Okay, that is from the nozzles attached. Now let's go for the next one. So herein you have got diffused aerators. Now please remember that if you want to achieve aeration, there are only two ways. Allow air to come in contact with water or allow water to come in contact with air. So till now, whatever you have been seeing is bringing in water in contact with air. Okay. Now, this is mechanical editors. Please understand, every technique has its merits and demerits. Probably a mechanical editor would not be successful in an ecosystem which can endanger fishes. Now, let's move further. Once that you have undertaken aeration, the next step, or the unit operation would be sedimentation. Now, in simple words, sedimentation is a process wherein discrete particles or settleable solids would settle down. Given some time, given some detention period, all those impurities which would settle down if you give them some time on the basis of its size, based on its weight, okay, then it is called as sedimentation. But what you need to really understand here is there is a difference between settling and sedimenting. Settling is a process wherein those heavier particles are descending in the water medium. Sedimenting is the image you see on the far right hand corner, wherein they get condensed, they get settled at the bottom, and as more and more solids are settling, okay, they are getting compressed by their own weight, or rather overweight. Okay, now let's move further. So if I can remove, the settlable solids or the heavier solids, that is based on your Stokes law, but there are certain solids which, despite your best efforts, by giving sufficient detention, they may not settle down. So I'm not talking about settlable solids, I'm talking about the flocculant solids. There are certain solids, impurities, which are so fine, so tiny, that despite how much ever detention you provide them, they don't settle down. So now, you can go for different types of sedimentation. Okay, as you have learned previously, it can be rectangular, it can be circular, it can be horizontal bottom, hopper bottom, and so forth. But despite all your best efforts, okay, those fine, tiny colloidal particles do not settle down. That is when you need to undertake the next level of operation, which is coagulation. So coagulation is a process wherein you add certain chemicals such as coagulants. For instance, when you remember, if you recollect what you studied in last sem, alum, copperas, ferric chloride, and so forth. Now, what happens is these chemicals, okay, these coagulants, when they are added, due to different aspects, it could be sweep coagulation, it could be electrolytic action, it could be due to van der Waals, that is your Brownian movement. Due to different mechanisms, these coagulants basically aid or support those fine suspended solids to also settle down, wherein these coagulants make these fine suspended solids to become bulkier, to get attached with each other, stick with each other, and eventually, as this process continues, those particles will become heavier and they would settle down. So you can, you're converting or transforming a suspended solid into a settlable solid. But now that is coagulation you're talking about. Then what is flocculation that you have learned? Flocculation is a process wherein you accelerate the rate of settling. Now, if I give you an example, if I give you a glass of water and if I put some sugar in that, okay, it would take some time for the sugar to naturally dissolve. However, if I give you a stirrer or a spoon and ask you to stir it, then the rate at which your mixing has taken place is faster. It has taken lesser time. So that is what we talk in the context of flocculation. Flocculation is wherein you provide external energy. Okay, and due to this external energy, the rate of mixing enhances and the rate of settling also enhances. So this is a simple description of how coagulation and flocculation take place. Further, you will be exposed to experiments such as jar test, wherein you decide the optimum dosage of a coagulant. This is the experimental setup when it comes to our laboratory. Okay. Now, once that you have completed the unit operation or the primary treatment such as sedimentation, and then you move on to secondary, that is coagulation and flocculation, it is possible that your drinking water based on the original source would still contain extremely fine solids which could not have been removed. Despite your best efforts with sedimentation and clariflocculation, those fine suspended solids have still managed to escape and they remain in your water. and of course you cannot give water to consumers with that. So the next level of operation is your filtration. Now, as you recollect, as you have learned in the last semester, now filtration, the action of filtration can be can be due to four possible means: mechanical straining, sedimentation, biological metabolism, or electrolytic action. I'll not be delving into this deeper because you have learned this, okay? But the images that you see on the screen should be able to help you to relate to those four techniques. Okay, now you also had learned that when it comes to filtration, there are different types: rapid sand filters, slow sand filters, and pressure filters. So now you're looking at slow sand filters. This is a pressure filter. You can see both horizontal and vertical. And this is a rapid sand filter. So if you remember, you had actually learned about, how these, why these filters are so called, the construction aspects, the design aspects, the working aspects. Now, if I would like to put it in a simple line, when the rate of filtration is very slow, it is slow sand filters. When the rate of filtration is very high, it is rapid sand filters. But when the rate of filtration is extremely high, then it is pressure. But rather putting it more technical, I'm sure now you're already aware that slow sand filters, which came first into existence, is obsolete. It is no more used. Okay, and now for any municipality or residential areas, what you tend to go for is the rapid sand filters. But what do you use the pressure filter? For smaller installations such as an industry or an institution, because you can have these rapid sands, you can have a rapid sand filter on a plain terrain, which because it occupies a greater area. But when it comes to your pressure filter, okay, it can be installed within your living space. Okay, and please note, even your engineering college also has a vertical pressure filter. Now, what you have also learned, during the previous semester is every operation of your filters are divided into two types. One is the actual filtration process, and the second one is your actual backwash process, wherein you clean the filter. Okay, I'll show you a small video, and you can just go through it. It's okay if you cannot hear it, but the objective is to make you see something which will help you. This video has been downloaded from YouTube. If you recollect, that's the wash water trough that you're looking at. Thank you. Now, let's move further. I'm sure that you have learned in your previous semester that amidst all the unit operations and unit processes, there is one treatment which stands out. That is, if due to financial, that is economic, or due to any other condition, let's say an emergency, or a natural disaster, you're unable to give any of those previous treatments, but there is one treatment that you need to give. It is mandatory. There is no way that you can allow the water to be transported to a consumer without that. And that treatment, my dear friends, is disinfection. So what was the relevance of disinfection? We need to understand that water can contain not just physical and chemical impurities, but it also contains biological impurities, rather microbiological impurities. That is, we're talking about bacteria, viruses, protozoans, rotifers, amoeba, and so forth. And now, if these microorganisms are capable of causing disease to you when they enter your body or your ecosystem, then they are pathogens. They spread diseases. Okay, now any waterborne disease for that matter. So there is no way that you can allow the water to have these pathogens. So if you remember, disinfection was a process wherein you eliminate or completely destroy all the microbial presence inside the water. Your target is, of course, pathogens, but then anything in the water would eventually be eliminated. And so in the last semester, you had studied very simple disinfection techniques such as boiling, to chemical techniques such as adding iodine, bromine, chlorine, and also some costlier advanced techniques such as ozone treatment or even ultraviolet disinfection. But most importantly, amidst all these different kind of treatments, the disinfection technique that you gave more priority was chlorine. But before we shift on to chlorine, I hope that you have recollected, if you go to villages, if you still go to villages, and in those open wells, sometimes you find the water with a pinkish stain. That is, those villages are still going for the simple, cost effective potassium permanganate. But sometimes in the cities, okay, you might find disinfection by a costlier method, such as using ultraviolet rays or ozone. But the most accepted, the most widely employed form of disinfection is by chlorine, addition of chlorine. Okay, now that this is chlorination. I will not be delving too deep into this, okay, but I hope you recollect terminology such as free available chlorine, residual chlorine, total chlorine, chlorine added. I hope you also recollect, types of chlorination, pre-chlorination, post-chlorination, super-chlorination, plain chlorination, dechlorination, and of course, breakpoint chlorination. So chlorine can be added in different forms. Now, once you're done with disinfection, the water is pretty much safe for you to drink. Okay. However, there are certain treatments that are add-on and cannot be witnessed or observed in all the treatment plants, and this is because of the features such as geological formations or the topography and so forth. For instance, if you're talking about a source of drinking water from the underground, from places such as Tumkur or Pavagada, all right, so in these places the water also contains certain extra contaminants which would be harmful to your human body. So I'm now talking about your tertiary treatment or miscellaneous treatment. Some places your water is expected to be hard. Okay, that is, your water contains temporary hardness, permanent hardness. Temporary hardness, as you have learned in last semester, comes from carbonates. Okay, and your permanent hardness comes from sulfates, nitrates, phosphates. Softening is the process wherein you demineralize or you remove these hardness causing impurities. Again, as simple as boiling, if you want to remove the hardness due to carbonates and bicarbonates, but if you want to remove the permanent hardness, boiling will not suffice. And then you need to go for advanced techniques such as, ion exchange or using a zeolite bed and so forth. Now, the most important thing that you need to understand as a public health engineer or as an environmental engineer or as a civil engineer is fluoride in drinking water is a double-edged problem. Having too less of fluoride is also bad, and having too much of fluoride is also bad. To having too less of fluoride, triggers or aggravates something called as dental caries. Okay. Now, at the same time, if you have excess of fluorides, then it can cause fluorosis. It can be dental fluorosis, it can be skeletal fluorosis, and so forth. Now, also in the last sem, not only you have learned how to add fluoride into the water by using some chemicals, but you also learned the various methods in which fluoride can be removed. Among all those techniques, such as using activated alumina or bone char, the most important, the most popular technique that you have learned is the Nalgonda technique. Then, my dear friends, once all these treatments are done, preliminary, primary, secondary, miscellaneous, the next step is to transport the water, treated water, from your treatment plant to the consumer. So the distribution system plays a very important role, wherein you've got reservoirs. As you can see, this is a overhead tank or elevated reservoir in Chitradurga. Okay, so you can, as you have learned, you can have elevated reservoirs, you can have a standpipe, you can have a ground level reservoir, and you know very well that when it comes to distribution, you have continuous system of supply, intermittent system of supply, and you also have learned that your mode of pumping, that is depending on the relative positioning of the water source and the residence. Okay, you can have a gravity system, you can have a pumping system, or you can have a dual system. All this was learned by you in the previous semester. So my dear friends, just to summarize the recap of water supply scheme, what is that you have learned and what is that will be beneficial to you in this semester is to have a very good, fair understanding and recollection of your knowledge with respect to the importance of water supply. Okay, what are the different unit operations? What are the different unit processes? What are the different kind of treatments which is being given to water? And why do we give that? Okay, I would request all of you to go through these references to enhance your knowledge beyond the scope of this presentation. In the next lecture, I'll be explaining to you the significance of a wastewater treatment system. And presently in this semester, you are learning about wastewater treatment system itself. Okay, now the first thing that would be taught to you in your wastewater treatment system would be sewerage system. Now, before I end this presentation, I'll be showing you a video. This would be a quick recap of whatever I have done till now. And once we're done with this, then I'll be, we are open to discussion and we are open to question and answer sessions.
Hello,
Kindly look at this video, listen to it.
Welcome back in another video of water treatment. The aim of water treatment is to produce and maintain water that is hygienically safe, aesthetically attractive, and palatable.
Even if the audio is not, even if the video is not audible, I would request you to observe carefully. I'll pitch in.
In an economic manner. Thus, before arriving at your tap, water is treated in drinking water treatment plant. Today, in this video, I will tell you everything about the drinking water treatment process, how these processes works, what are the problems during operation and maintenance. So, for complete information, kindly see this complete video, and if you like this video, please subscribe to my channel and like this video. This is the animation of process of typical drinking water treatment plant, where inlet water from river is collected in nearby raw water storage tank and pumped to cascade aerator of water treatment plant. Before cascade aeration, pre-chlorination is used for initial disinfection at starting point. In cascade aerator, water is allowed to flow downward through a series of steps to aerate the inlet water for imparting freshness, removal of odor, dissolved gases, iron and manganese. After cascade aerator, water flows to flash mixture cum flocculator, where coagulant chemical like alum, lime, polyelectrolyte, etc. are dosed and mixed properly by rapid mixer and passed to flocculator, where flocks are generated with the help of slow mixing by pedal agitator. This unit is used for removal of turbidity and to convert fine solid particle to bigger size flock particles. After flocculator, water is sent to clarifier where, due to gravity, incoming flocks are settled down at bottom of clarifier and clear water is sent to rapid gravity filter for filtration of remaining fine solid particles. This unit comprises a bed of sand supported on gravel overlaying an under drainage system. It is used for removal of less than 20 NTU turbidity. After filtration, turbidity is reduced to less than 1 NTU. Now, if hardness is not an issue, then water is sent to ozonation unit for disinfection. Alternatively, instead of ozone disinfection, post-chlorination can also be used for low-budget projects. After disinfection, drinkable water is ready for use and send city's drinking water overhead tank. And the sludge produced from bottom of the clarifier is sent to thickener, followed by sludge drying bed through sludge transfer pumps. Sludge drying beds comprises under drainage system. Thus, drainage liquid is further sent to clarifier and dried sludge from sludge drying beds is disposed of as per client's requirement.